The sun was beginning to set, casting an eerie orange glow over the horizon as Noah stood on the edge of the abandoned town. His eyes scanned the desolate landscape, a silent witness to what had once been a thriving community. The town, now nothing more than a ruin, was wrapped in an unsettling quiet that only served to heighten the mysteries surrounding it. For years, people had whispered about the town's fall. Some said it was cursed, others claimed it was the result of the early days of the zombie outbreak. But Noah had heard the rumors and was determined to uncover the truth. His brother, Jacob, had disappeared here months ago, and Noah couldn't shake the feeling that the answers to his disappearance lay within these forgotten streets. Noah's heart raced as he adjusted the straps of his backpack. His fingers brushed against the worn map he'd found, its edges frayed, its contents barely readable. The map had been a clue, left behind by his brother, who had meticulously marked out paths, locations, and strange symbols that hinted at something sinister. The search had brought Noah to this moment, to the edge of a mystery he had no idea was so deeply buried. The buildings ahead seemed to tower over him, their windows shattered, doors hanging ajar. The silence was deafening, punctuated only by the occasional rustle of wind blowing through the remains of trees and debris. The zombie outbreak had ravaged this place years ago, yet the ghosts of what had once been still lingered in the air. The roads were overrun with weeds, and the once vibrant storefronts now resembled the hollowed-out shells of their former selves. Noah carefully stepped forward, each footfall causing a slight crunch as his boots met the broken glass and dried leaves scattered on the ground. He had to move quickly, the sun would set soon, and night in this town brought with it more than just darkness. The creatures that lurked here had long since learned to adapt to the haunting hours of the night, making it a dangerous time to be caught out in the open. With a deep breath, Noah entered the first building, a dilapidated general store. Inside, the shelves were mostly empty, save for a few abandoned cans and scattered remnants of life before the outbreak. He could almost imagine the bustling of families coming in for last-minute supplies, the laughter of children echoing through the aisles. But all of that was long gone. Only the scent of decay lingered now, thick and stifling, as if the town had given up its last breath long ago. Noah pulled out his flashlight, casting a narrow beam of light that flickered slightly in the damp air. His eyes scanned the room, looking for anything that could give him a clue about what had happened here. His heart skipped a beat when he noticed a journal lying on the counter, its pages yellowed and fragile. Without hesitation, he grabbed it, flipping it open to the first entry. The handwriting was frantic, almost panicked, but what caught Noah's attention was the mention of something called the infection source. The journal's author wrote about strange occurrences, people getting sick, disappearing in the middle of the night, and the first signs of the undead. Noah quickly scanned more pages, his eyes widening as he read about a group of survivors who had holed up in the town's old church. The journal seemed to suggest that there was more to this town's downfall than just the outbreak. There were darker, more sinister forces at play. As he read on, he felt a chill creep up his spine. His brother's name appeared on one of the pages. Jacob had been in this town. He had been trying to find answers, too. And now, Noah was here, standing in the ruins of the place, hoping to find what had happened to him. Suddenly, a noise from outside snapped Noah out of his thoughts. A distant, low growl echoed through the empty streets, followed by the unmistakable shuffle of undead feet. His pulse quickened. He knew that sound all too well. The town was not as empty as it seemed. Without a second thought, Noah grabbed the journal, shoved it into his backpack, and headed for the back exit of the store. As he slipped through the crumbling doorframe, he could hear the shuffle growing louder. His mind raced, heart pounding in his chest as he weighed his options. The streets outside were no longer safe. He needed to move quickly, find a place to hide, and figure out his next step. He couldn't let the zombies catch him, not when he was so close to uncovering the truth. He dashed down the street, using the cover of fallen debris and abandoned cars to stay out of sight. The sound of the undead grew closer, and his instincts kicked in. Noah knew that surviving here meant keeping one step ahead, never staying in one place too long. Every corner, every alley held a potential danger. His brother might still be alive, somewhere in this forsaken town, but Noah had no idea what he would face in the search for him. The only thing he knew for sure was that the town's dark secrets were waiting to be uncovered, and that they would change everything. The low growls from the undead seemed to linger in the air, but Noah didn't dare look back. His legs burned with the effort of running, his chest tight from the constant fear and adrenaline. He ducked into an alley between two collapsed buildings, pressing his back against the cold brick. His mind raced as he tried to calm his breathing, scanning the streets for any signs of movement. The town, once a lively community, had become a ghost town in every sense of the word. Its emptiness seemed almost unnatural, as if something had intentionally hollowed out its soul. Despite the chaos and destruction, there was still a disturbing sense of calm, an ominous stillness that gnawed at the edges of Noah's thoughts. The undead had left behind their grotesque mark on the town, but there was something more to it. Something hidden in the walls of this decimated place. Noah quickly glanced down at the journal in his bag. His brother's last clue was clear: a group of survivors had taken refuge in the old church, which stood at the heart of the town. From the descriptions in the journal, it seemed like they had been holed up there for weeks, maybe longer, fighting off both the undead and something else. But why had Jacob gone there? What had he hoped to find? The last entry in the journal mentioned an unknown source of the infection, something darker than just a virus. Could it have been the key to everything? Noah had no choice but to head to the church. Pushing himself to his feet, Noah took a deep breath and stepped out of the alley. The streets were eerily silent, the only sounds the occasional distant groan of a zombie or the rustling of wind through abandoned homes. He needed to move faster. Every moment spent out in the open increased the chance of encountering the undead. Noah sprinted across the cracked pavement, his flashlight held tightly in one hand while the other gripped his backpack. As he neared the edge of the square, he saw it, an imposing stone structure in the distance, partially hidden by overgrown ivy and the remains of fallen trees. The church. The building loomed ahead like a dark sentinel, its stained glass windows shattered and its doors hanging loosely on their hinges. The town's decay had reached the church too, but unlike the rest of the buildings, it still seemed to hold an air of foreboding strength. Noah approached cautiously, stepping lightly on the grass that had overtaken the once pristine courtyard. The church was still standing, but who knew for how long? As he reached the steps, Noah hesitated. He could feel the weight of history pressing down on him, a sense of dread that seemed to seep from the very foundation of the building. The door creaked loudly as he pushed it open, sending a chill through his body. The interior was bathed in an unnatural twilight, the only light coming from the cracks in the walls where the sun's rays filtered through the grime. The smell inside was stale, and something heavier, like old blood and decay, hung in the air. Noah crept inside, keeping to the shadows. His footsteps echoed in the vast space as he moved cautiously down the aisle. The pews were overturned, and religious icons were marred by layers of dust. It was clear that no one had used the church for worship in a long time. But as he ventured further in, Noah's eyes caught something that sent a jolt of recognition through his chest, a symbol, scratched hastily into the stone floor near the altar. It was the same symbol his brother had drawn on the map, a series of interconnected circles, with an eye at its center. Noah knelt, tracing the shape with his fingers. It was a symbol of protection, but it looked distorted, as though it had been tampered with. Was this some kind of warning? His heart pounded in his chest as he continued to examine the area, the hairs on the back of his neck standing on end. The closer he got to the altar, the colder the air seemed to grow. Suddenly, he heard something, a low, guttural sound, like a groan. Noah froze, his body going rigid as he strained to listen. It came again, louder this time. The sound seemed to be coming from beneath the altar, but how could that be? The church's foundation was solid, no visible cracks or holes leading to the crypt. Was it another survivor, or worse, something far more sinister? Noah wasn't sure if he wanted to find out, but he knew he had to. His brother's last days had been spent here, and there was a reason Jacob had sought this place out. It wasn't just a haven from the undead, it was tied to the answers Noah was desperately searching for. He moved toward the altar cautiously, placing his hand on the stone surface. As he leaned in closer, he noticed something odd. One of the stone slabs was slightly displaced, as if it had been moved recently. His heart skipped a beat. Could this be the entrance to a hidden passage? Noah knew he had no choice but to investigate. He used all his strength to push the stone aside, revealing a narrow staircase leading downward, into a dark, suffocating tunnel. The air in the tunnel was thick with dust and decay, but Noah knew there was no turning back. The answers he sought were waiting down there, hidden in the dark heart of this forsaken town. He took one last glance at the church above him, as if bracing himself for whatever lay ahead, and stepped into the darkness. Noah's footsteps echoed in the narrow tunnel as he descended into the blackness. The stale air became heavier with each step, pressing against his chest as if the walls themselves were trying to keep him trapped in the shadows. His flashlight beam flickered, casting erratic light on the walls covered in strange, faded markings. These symbols, similar to the one on the altar, seemed to pulse with a dark energy, something that made Noah's skin crawl. The narrow staircase led to an underground chamber, its cold stone walls stretching upward, disappearing into the gloom above. As Noah stepped onto the stone floor, the chill in the air seeped into his bones. The room was vast, its size betraying the church above it. It felt ancient, untouched by time and the ravages of the world above. The stench of mildew and rot lingered in the air, but beneath it was something far worse, an acrid, metallic smell that reminded Noah of blood long past its freshness. Noah's eyes darted around, searching for any clue as to what lay in this forgotten place. His heart beat faster as he took in his surroundings, scattered, broken remains of old furniture, overturned crates, and faded tapestries that once decorated the chamber. The walls were adorned with more symbols, etched deeply into the stone as if they had been carved with purpose. He recognized them now, they weren't just random marks. They were ritualistic, perhaps tied to whatever had occurred in this town. He moved further into the chamber, his flashlight sweeping over the walls. His breath caught when he saw it, a large stone pedestal at the center of the room, its surface worn and chipped by time. But what caught his attention was the object placed on top of it. A large, ancient-looking book, its pages yellowed and fragile, lay open as if waiting for someone to read its contents. The air around the pedestal felt charged, as if the book itself was brimming with power, something far beyond what Noah had ever imagined. With trepidation, Noah approached the pedestal. He could feel his pulse quicken, his hands trembling as he reached out to touch the book. The moment his fingers brushed the pages, a low hum seemed to vibrate through the room, and a distant, hollow sound filled the air, a voice, murmuring in a language Noah couldn't understand. His heart raced, but his curiosity pushed him to continue. He flipped the pages carefully, reading the faded text. The writing was difficult to decipher, but some words stood out: awakening, infection, curse, and blood. Suddenly, a chill swept through the room, and Noah froze. The hum grew louder, and the air seemed to thicken around him. His flashlight flickered again, casting long, erratic shadows against the walls. He spun around, his senses on high alert. The noise from earlier, the soft shuffle of movement, was back. Only now, it was much closer. Noah's stomach churned as he realized he wasn't alone. He turned quickly, reaching for the flashlight, his hand trembling as the light bounced across the room. Shadows shifted in the corners, too quick and too fluid to be natural. A low growl vibrated the air, sending a wave of fear down his spine. He wasn't sure what it was, but it was coming toward him. His instincts kicked in. Without thinking, he sprinted for the far side of the room, ducking behind a pile of debris. The growls were growing louder now, more pronounced. Noah peered cautiously around the corner, trying to make sense of the strange figures moving through the darkness. At first, he thought they were zombies, but there was something wrong, something different, about them. These creatures didn't move like the mindless undead he had encountered before. They were faster, more deliberate in their movements, their eyes gleaming with a strange intelligence. Their skin was mottled and stretched tight over their skeletal frames, their limbs contorted unnaturally. These were not just any zombies. These were something else, something born of the town's hidden darkness. Noah's breath caught in his throat as the creatures circled the room, their eyes scanning for him. They moved with purpose, as if they were guarding something, or someone. A soft whimper broke the silence, and Noah's gaze snapped to the far corner of the chamber. In the dim light, he could make out the silhouette of a person huddled against the wall. His heart skipped a beat. Was it his brother, Jacob? Was it another survivor? He had to get closer. The creatures were still moving, but their focus seemed to be on the pedestal, the very place Noah had just been standing. He had to make his move now, before they turned their attention back to him. He knew he couldn't stay hidden forever. The chamber was too vast, and the creatures were too numerous. The only chance he had was to find out who, or what, the other person was and to get out of here before the darkness consumed him, too. Noah steeled himself. He wasn't sure what he'd stumbled upon, but one thing was certain, the answers he sought were buried in this cursed place. And he had to uncover them, no matter what it took. Slowly, cautiously, he made his way toward the person huddled in the corner. His flashlight cast a narrow beam of light over the figure, revealing the pale, trembling face of a young woman. She looked up at him, her eyes wide with fear, and whispered, "You shouldn't have come. It's too late, they're watching. They never stop watching." Noah felt a chill run down his spine. The horrors of this town were far from over. And now, the darkness was beginning to awaken. The woman's words echoed in Noah's mind, her warning hanging in the air like a cold shadow. They never stop watching. His breath caught in his throat, and for a moment, he could only stare at her, trying to make sense of the scene unfolding in front of him. The creatures that had been circling the room were now frozen, their eyes not on him but on the woman huddled against the wall. It was as if the creatures could sense the presence of something, or someone, that wasn't supposed to be there. Noah's heart pounded. He moved slowly toward her, his steps barely making a sound as he approached the trembling figure. He couldn't take his eyes off the monsters, still lurking in the darkness, but his focus remained on the woman. There was something about her, a sense of urgency in her presence. She wasn't just a survivor of the zombie outbreak, she was tied to something much deeper, something Noah wasn't prepared for. The woman flinched when Noah crouched beside her, her eyes flickering to the creatures before darting back to him. Her voice trembled, a stark contrast to the terrifying calm in the chamber. You don't understand," she whispered hoarsely, her words barely audible. "This place, it's not just the infection. It's something older, something far worse. It's tied to the land itself, to the blood that once soaked these streets." Noah knelt beside her, the hairs on his neck standing on end as the whispers grew louder in the darkness. The creatures were shifting again, their growls low and guttural, but they seemed hesitant, like they knew they were being watched. A shiver ran down Noah's spine. "Who are they?" Noah asked, his voice barely louder than the wind outside. "What is this place? Why are they here?" The woman's eyes widened, and she glanced nervously at the creatures, who seemed to be closing in on their position. "They're not like the others you've seen," she said, her voice breaking. "They were the first. The ones who were here before everything changed. They were the ones who caused it." "Caused what?" Noah pressed, his mind racing with questions, but his fear kept him from speaking too loudly. "The infection? The outbreak?" "No," she shook her head, her expression one of deep sorrow. "The outbreak was just the beginning. These creatures, they are bound to this place. They were created by something older, something buried beneath the ground. The infection spread, yes, but it didn't come from nowhere. It came from them." Noah's stomach twisted. The symbols, the rituals, everything he had seen so far was pointing to something far darker than he had imagined. But he didn't have time to dwell on the implications of her words. The creatures were getting closer, their eyes glinting with malevolent intelligence. He needed to act fast. "Come on, we need to get out of here," Noah urged, reaching out to help the woman to her feet. "We can't stay here. There's no time." She didn't move. Instead, she looked up at him with wide, fearful eyes. "You don't understand," she whispered again, shaking her head as if in disbelief. "You can't leave. Not now. They'll follow you. They'll always follow you." Noah frowned, confusion and dread flooding him. "What do you mean? Who will follow me?" "The town," she said, her voice low and frantic. The curse, it's not just the zombies. It's the land. It's bound to this place, to this town. And now that you've come, they know you're here. You can't leave. Not unless you destroy the source. Destroy the source? Noah echoed, his mind struggling to keep up with the gravity of her words. What source? What are you talking about? The woman's eyes darted toward the pedestal, where the book still lay open, its pages seemingly glowing in the dim light. That book, she murmured. It's the key. It's the source of all of this. If you don't destroy it, they'll keep coming. The infection won't stop. And the curse, it will never break. Noah looked back at the pedestal. The ancient book seemed to pulse, its pages turning as if it had a life of its own. His mind raced, trying to piece together the fragments of information he had learned so far. He had been searching for his brother, Jacob, but now it seemed like he had uncovered something far more dangerous, something that could threaten everyone, everywhere. This town's downfall wasn't just a random outbreak. It was part of something far darker, something that reached back into the town's history. But as Noah turned to face the woman, he noticed something horrifying. Her eyes had glazed over, and her hands were shaking violently. She let out a strangled gasp, her body jerking as if something were pulling her away. Noah's breath caught in his throat as her gaze locked onto him one last time. It's too late for me, she whispered, her voice barely a whisper. But you can still stop them. Before Noah could react, the woman collapsed to the ground, her body twitching uncontrollably. The creatures that had been circling the room suddenly turned toward her, their growls intensifying, and they began to move toward her lifeless form with terrifying speed. A sense of urgency gripped Noah. He couldn't waste any more time. With the creatures now focused on the woman, he had a window of opportunity. He had to get to the book and destroy it, before it was too late. Before the curse spread even further. He took a deep breath, running toward the pedestal with all the strength he could muster. His hands shook as he reached for the book, and the moment his fingers brushed the pages, a sudden surge of energy pulsed through the room. The ground beneath him rumbled, and the shadows in the chamber seemed to come alive, swirling around him as if they were trying to drag him down. Noah clutched the book, but as he tried to pull it from the pedestal, he realized something horrifying. It was bound to the stone, as if it were part of the building itself. No matter how hard he pulled, it wouldn't come loose. And then, the whispers began. The voice from earlier, soft, insistent, and full of malice, filled his mind. You cannot destroy what has already been awakened. The voice, low and insidious, echoed through Noah's mind, reverberating in the chamber like a living thing. You cannot destroy what has already been awakened. The words sent a cold shiver down his spine, and for a moment, he stood frozen in place, his fingers still gripping the book as it pulsed with a life of its own. The shadows around him thickened, swirling in unnatural patterns, and the temperature in the room dropped sharply. Noah tried to pull the book free from the pedestal, but it was as if it had fused with the stone. His hands slipped over the weathered cover, and no matter how hard he strained, the book refused to budge. Panic surged through him. There had to be a way to stop this. There had to be a way to destroy the source, to end the curse, and save what was left of this town. But the room seemed to shift around him, the walls closing in, the whispers growing louder, and the creatures, those grotesque, twisted things, were moving again. Their eyes glowed with a sickly light, their grotesque bodies contorting in unnatural ways as they crawled toward him, their growls vibrating through the floor beneath his feet. The woman's warning flashed in his mind, they'll always follow you. Noah's chest tightened. The curse was not just tied to the town, it was tied to him now. The moment he entered this place, he had sealed his fate. He had woken something ancient, something that could not be undone by simple force or brute strength. His eyes darted around the chamber, seeking any sign of hope. He needed to think. He needed to find another way. And then, something caught his attention, a glimmer of light near the far wall. It was faint at first, but as Noah focused on it, the glow grew stronger, more distinct. There was something embedded in the stone, a faint, shimmering crack that pulsed with a strange, almost magnetic energy. Noah knew that whatever was hidden in that crack was tied to the power of the book. It was the only thing in this cursed place that wasn't completely consumed by darkness. It might be the key to breaking the curse, or at the very least, to stopping the creatures from closing in on him. With one last glance at the creatures, who were now just moments away from reaching him, Noah made a decision. He would have to break the pedestal. If the book was the source of the curse, then destroying it wasn't enough. He had to destroy everything around it, the very thing that held it in place. He let go of the book and dashed toward the glowing crack in the wall. His hands trembled as he ran his fingers over the stone, searching for any way to break it open. The hum in the air intensified, and the shadows seemed to push in on him from every direction. The creatures were almost upon him. He had seconds, maybe less, before they reached him. His fingers finally found something, a jagged, metallic object embedded in the crack. It was old, rusted, but it gleamed with an unnatural light. Without thinking, he wrenched it free from the stone. The moment it was in his hand, the ground beneath him trembled violently, and the air grew thick with the sound of grinding stone. A low, reverberating roar echoed through the chamber as the creatures halted in their tracks, their eyes locked onto him. Noah's heart raced. The object he held felt like a key to unlocking whatever terrible secret was buried here. He didn't know what it was, but the dark energy pulsing through it felt familiar, like it had been waiting for someone to find it. He raised the object above his head and slammed it down into the pedestal. The impact was deafening. The sound of stone cracking and shattering echoed through the chamber as the pedestal splintered apart, sending shards of rock flying in every direction. The creatures let out a guttural screech, their eyes wide with what Noah could only interpret as fear. The shadows that had been swirling around him suddenly shrank back, retreating from the destruction like they were being repelled by a force they couldn't understand. The ground trembled again, but this time it wasn't in anger, it was in release. The dark energy that had been suffocating the chamber began to dissipate, and the air cleared. The oppressive weight that had been pressing down on Noah lifted, and the temperature in the room slowly returned to normal. The glow from the crack in the wall faded, and the creatures, those terrifying, twisted things, stopped moving. For a long moment, Noah stood in the ruins of the pedestal, his body trembling with exhaustion and fear. The chamber was silent now, the unnatural energy that had once filled the space dissipating into nothingness. He looked down at the object he had used to destroy the pedestal. Its surface was covered in ancient symbols, its edges worn smooth by centuries of use. But just as he began to breathe a sigh of relief, he heard it again, the whispers. This time, they weren't coming from the shadows. They were coming from the walls, from the very stones themselves. The voices were soft, barely perceptible, but their meaning was clear. Too late. Noah's blood ran cold. The creatures were gone for now, but the real threat was still here, hidden deep within the town. The curse hadn't been broken, it had only been delayed. And now, with the book destroyed, the real horror was just beginning. The whispers were growing louder, echoing off the cold stone walls of the chamber, their insistent murmuring creeping into Noah's mind like a disease. Too late, too late. They weren't just words, they were a warning. A realization that Noah had made a terrible mistake. He thought destroying the pedestal would end it all, put an end to the curse, to the creatures, to the town's dark secret. But instead, he had only made the darkness more aware of him. Noah's chest tightened as he turned in place, his gaze darting around the chamber, trying to make sense of the silence that had followed the destruction of the pedestal. The creatures had stopped moving, their growls silenced, their once glowing eyes now dim. But something about the stillness felt wrong, too still. He wasn't safe. Not yet. The woman's warning echoed in his mind, "You can't leave. Not unless you destroy the source." He had thought the pedestal was the source, the focal point of everything that had cursed this place. But now, he wasn't so sure. He felt a presence, like something was watching him, something older, more ancient than anything he could comprehend. And it wasn't finished with him yet. His hand instinctively gripped the jagged object he had used to break the pedestal, now slick with sweat from his tense fingers. Its surface hummed with a strange, unsettling energy that seemed to pulse in rhythm with his heartbeat. He could feel the weight of the object in his hand, as though it were calling to him, urging him to use it again, to find the truth hidden beneath the surface of this cursed town. But where to go? What was left to do? The room he was in, the chamber beneath the church, felt like a tomb, the only exit the way he had entered, through the narrow, winding tunnel. But even as Noah turned toward the tunnel, his feet heavy on the cold stone, a sickening feeling gnawed at his gut. That wasn't the way out. The real way out lay somewhere else, somewhere deeper. Somewhere the curse was anchored, waiting for him to find it. Noah took a deep breath and moved toward the far side of the room, stepping over the broken remnants of the pedestal. The flickering light of his flashlight cast long shadows against the walls, and with each step, the air seemed to grow thicker, more oppressive. He felt the weight of the town's dark history pressing on his shoulders, suffocating him. There was no escaping it. Not now. As he neared the far wall, Noah's eyes caught sight of something, a faint outline of a door, hidden behind layers of dust and debris. He hadn't noticed it before, and he certainly hadn't seen it when he first entered the chamber. But now, it stood before him, beckoning him forward. It was a small door, the wood warped and blackened by years of neglect. The handle was rusted, nearly crumbling to dust in his hands. Without thinking, Noah reached for the handle and turned it. The door creaked open slowly, a sound that seemed to reverberate throughout the chamber, and Noah stepped into a narrow hallway beyond. The passage was dark, its stone walls slick with moisture. The air was damp, and the smell of decay was stronger here, more pungent, as if the very walls were alive with the history of what had happened in this place. The farther Noah walked, the more the whispers grew in volume, until they were like 1,000 voices all speaking at once. The hallway stretched on for what felt like miles, winding deeper beneath the earth. His flashlight flickered again, casting dancing shadows along the passageway. The sense of something watching him never left. It was like a presence, a cold, insidious feeling that gnawed at the edges of his mind. The creatures may have disappeared for now, but Noah knew deep down that they were only a symptom of something much worse. Something that wasn't going to stop until it got what it wanted. As he turned a corner, the passage opened up into a cavernous room. The walls were lined with strange carvings, ancient symbols, much like the ones he had seen earlier. But there was something new here, something that made his blood run cold. In the center of the room stood a large stone altar, its surface stained with a dark substance Noah couldn't identify. Surrounding it were rows of wooden benches, their seats long since rotted away, leaving only their skeletal remains behind. On the altar was a figure, motionless, lying there as if waiting for someone. Noah's heart skipped a beat as he recognized it. It was Jacob. His brother. But something was wrong. Very wrong. Jacob's body was unnaturally still, his skin pale and waxy. His eyes were closed, his chest barely rising with shallow breaths. The moment Noah laid eyes on him, a cold shiver ran down his spine, and he knew, without a doubt, that his brother was not just unconscious, he was part of something far darker. A ritual. A sacrifice. No, Noah whispered, his voice barely audible as he stumbled toward the altar. The whispers grew louder, becoming a cacophony of voices that twisted around him like tendrils of darkness. He reached Jacob's side, his hands trembling as he gripped his brother's cold shoulder. "Jacob, wake up." Jacob's body didn't respond. But Noah could feel the faint pulse of something unnatural, coursing through his brother's veins. It was as if Jacob's very essence had been intertwined with the curse that had plagued this town. He was a vessel. A vessel for something far older, something that had been waiting to rise again. Noah's gaze fell on the stone altar, its surface etched with symbols that seemed to pulse with a life of their own. A deep dread settled in his chest. The town's secrets were here, beneath this altar, bound to Jacob's body. The ritual, whatever it had been, had not only cursed the town, it had been designed to bring something back. Something that had been buried for centuries. As Noah's heart raced, the shadows around the room seemed to writhe. The creatures were close, closer than ever. And they weren't the only ones watching. Noah realized, with growing horror, that he wasn't just in a race against time to save his brother. He was facing an ancient evil that would stop at nothing to return to the world above. And he was standing in its way. The whispers were deafening now, a maddening symphony of voices rising and falling in a rhythmic chant. Noah could feel them crawling under his skin, filling his head with thoughts that weren't his own. "It's too late, Noah. You are too late." The voice sounded like 1,000 voices, distant but close, comforting and horrifying all at once. It wasn't just the creatures anymore, it was the very essence of the town, the curse that had bound its soul for centuries. And now, Noah had awakened it. His brother's body lay on the altar, pale and lifeless, his chest rising and falling with slow, shallow breaths. The strange energy coursing through Jacob's veins seemed to pulse with every beat of Noah's heart. The air around him had become thick, suffocating, as if the walls themselves were alive, pressing in on him, suffusing the space with ancient, insidious power. Noah's hands gripped his brother's shoulders, trying to shake him awake, but Jacob remained still. There was no response, only the cold, hollow stare of a lifeless form, wrapped in the twisted energy of the curse. It was clear now, Jacob wasn't just unconscious. He had been transformed, bound by something far darker. He was part of this ritual. A vessel. And Noah's worst fear was beginning to take shape. The shadows around him stretched long, their inky tendrils snaking toward the altar, toward Jacob. The whispers grew louder, until it felt like the very walls of the cavern were vibrating with their sound. He could feel the stone beneath his feet trembling, as though the earth itself was preparing for something. "No," Noah whispered to himself, his voice shaking. He needed to think. He needed a way out. But there was no escape. There never had been. The curse had already chosen its path, and now Noah and his brother were both trapped within it. The creatures that had once circled the church now roamed freely, drawn to this place by the pull of whatever power had awakened within the walls. His eyes darted around the cavern, seeking anything that might help. The altar, the carvings on the walls, even the eerie light from the stone, a symbol, a clue, anything. But nothing made sense. The ritual had been interrupted, but not enough to stop the ancient power that had already been awakened. The whispering voices seemed to be growing in intensity, resonating deep within Noah's chest, as if the very fabric of time was unraveling around him. He could feel the town, its history, its pain. He could feel the curse, the blood that had been spilled here, the lives that had been lost, and the twisted ritual that had bound it all together. Something dark stirred in the heart of the town. It had been waiting, hidden beneath the surface, waiting for the right moment to return. And Noah had brought that moment about. His presence here, his meddling with the book, the pedestal, it had all been leading to this point. He had unwittingly released the past, and with it, something that had been buried for generations. The room seemed to darken as a sudden chill swept through the cavern, and Noah's breath fogged in the air. He looked up to see the shadows gathering in the center of the room, a swirling mass of blackness that seemed to pulse with malevolent energy. The creatures had stopped moving, but their eyes, those soulless, glowing eyes, were fixed on him, waiting, watching. Then, from the center of the shadows, a figure began to emerge. It was tall, its body thin and elongated, almost skeletal in appearance. It stepped forward with unnerving grace, its limbs bending at unnatural angles, as though it was made of shadows rather than flesh. Its face was obscured, its features hidden beneath a dark hood, but Noah could feel its gaze on him, cold, calculating, and full of ancient hatred. The creature's voice was like the crackling of 1,000 dry leaves, its words more felt than heard. "You have come, Noah. You have awakened what was buried. You have returned the blood to its rightful place." Noah's heart raced. He wanted to run. He wanted to scream, but his throat was tight, the weight of the creature's presence crushing him. He had never felt so small, so helpless. What are you?" Noah managed to choke out, his voice barely a whisper. The creature stepped closer, its gaze fixed on him. It tilted its head, as if amused by his question, and its voice slid into Noah's mind once again. "I am the keeper. The guardian of the forgotten ones. The ones who were betrayed by their own. You have released us, and now we shall return." A sickening realization washed over Noah. This was no mere zombie outbreak. This wasn't a curse that had gone wrong. The creatures were not mindless, soulless monsters, they were part of something far more dangerous. They were the last remnants of an ancient, cursed bloodline, cursed by their own people for a betrayal long ago. Noah had awakened something that had been meant to stay buried. The keeper, the creature before him, was the key to it all. And it was now fully awake. The curse wasn't just tied to the town, it was tied to the bloodline. The blood that had once flowed here, and now, it was Noah's blood. His own flesh was the final piece. The keeper's voice echoed in his mind once more. The town's time has come, and with it, yours. You cannot run. You cannot escape what has been awakened. You are now one of us. Noah's vision blurred as his head began to spin. His knees buckled, and he collapsed to the ground, his hands clutching his brother's lifeless form. The shadows began to close in on him, wrapping around him, suffocating him with their cold embrace. But there was still a glimmer of hope. As the darkness swallowed him, Noah's mind raced. He had to stop this. There had to be a way to break the curse, some way to end it all, to save Jacob and the town. But the truth was, he didn't know how. All he knew was that the creature before him, the keeper, had lived for centuries, waiting for this moment. And now, with his blood awakening the past, Noah was the key to everything. He had to act, and he had to act fast. Before the keeper's curse turned him into one of them. The shadows closed in around Noah like a suffocating storm, their cold tendrils wrapping around his body, pulling him deeper into their grasp. The keeper's presence, vast and ancient, filled the cavern with an overwhelming sense of dread. Every whisper, every flicker of movement seemed to push him closer to the inevitable. He could feel his breath growing shallow, his body weakening, as if the very essence of his being was being drained by the curse that now held him in its unyielding grip. Jacob's lifeless body lay next to him, still and cold, but Noah knew that it wasn't just his brother who was lost. The town, the people, the entire history of this place, it was all entwined in this dark force. He could feel it in his bones. This was more than a simple curse. It was a reckoning. The keeper's voice slithered through Noah's thoughts once more, thick with the weight of ages. You are the final piece, Noah. You cannot escape what is written in the blood of your ancestors. The town's fate is sealed, and so is yours. Join us in the darkness. Become one with the past. Noah's hands trembled as he clenched his fists. No. I can't let this happen. I won't. He thought of the town, the innocent lives that had been lost to the curse. He thought of the people he had met along the way, people who had fought, survived, and now stood on the precipice of destruction. It wasn't just about Jacob anymore. It was about saving everyone, breaking the cycle that had condemned them all. The keeper's figure loomed closer, its eyes, those deep, hollow pits of darkness, burning into his soul. The stone altar behind him began to vibrate, glowing with a sickly light as the ritual reached its apex. Noah knew that if he didn't act now, it would be too late. The keeper was about to claim victory, to finish what had been started long ago. But then, something inside Noah snapped. In that moment, he realized that the curse wasn't just tied to his bloodline, it was tied to the choices they made, to the actions they took. He could choose to break the cycle. He could choose to end the curse. The keeper, the ancient force that had haunted this town for centuries, had relied on the idea that the past would always dictate the future. But Noah was different. He was not just a product of his bloodline. He was the one who could break free. He reached into his pocket and pulled out the jagged object, the shard from the altar, the piece of the forgotten ritual. The moment it touched his skin, a surge of power shot through him. The symbols on the object flared to life, glowing with an intensity that matched the darkness around him. He could feel the power, dark and ancient, coursing through him, but he didn't let it control him. He would wield it. The keeper hissed, its voice no longer soothing but filled with fury. You cannot defy what is destined, Noah. You are part of the past. You cannot escape it. Noah's grip tightened on the shard as he stepped forward, his mind focused. He wasn't going to let the darkness consume him. He wasn't going to let the keeper finish what it had started. The creature had underestimated him. It had underestimated the power of choice, the power of resistance. The curse may have been born in the past, but it didn't have to be carried into the future. With a shout, Noah plunged the shard into the stone altar, the ancient symbols burning brighter than ever before. The ground beneath him shook violently as the darkness in the room recoiled. The keeper screeched, its voice reverberating through the cavern in a final, desperate wail. The shadows around Noah began to fade, their grip on him loosening, but the light from the shard blazed with blinding intensity. The stone altar cracked, crumbling into dust, and the power that had sustained the curse began to unravel. The creatures, once twisted and horrifying, screeched in agony, their forms flickering and dissolving into the ether. The keeper, now fully revealed, let out a howl of fury. Its form distorted, the very essence of its being disintegrating into nothingness, consumed by the light. "You cannot." The voice was cut off as the creature was obliterated, its power vanishing into the air, leaving only silence. And then, the world shifted. Noah felt a heavy pressure lift from his chest, the suffocating darkness dissipating like a bad dream. The oppressive weight that had once filled the cavern now faded, leaving only an eerie calm. The creatures were gone, their twisted forms nothing but echoes in the air. The altar had shattered completely, and the strange symbols had faded from view, leaving behind only the ruins of what once was. Jacob's body, once stiff and lifeless, now seemed to relax. The unnatural stillness that had clung to him vanished, and for the first time in what felt like forever, he breathed, deep and steady. The curse had been broken. Noah fell to his knees beside his brother, relief washing over him like a wave. It was over. The darkness was gone. The town, the people, the land, everything that had been consumed by the curse had been freed. But as Noah looked around the cavern, the eerie calm was broken by the sound of distant footsteps. Someone, something, was approaching. It was over for the curse, but Noah knew that there was always more to uncover. Always more secrets hidden in the shadows. But for now, Noah had one. He had broken the cycle. He had destroyed the source. And as the light of dawn crept into the cavern, he knew that the town, though scarred, was free. At least for now. And with Jacob by his side, Noah would make sure it stayed that way.